Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And Bill, we had to shift our planned topics off one episode because there's seismic news in the campaign, yes. And that is that Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris as his vice president, his running mate. And this is really big news. And boy, it's dominating the news. You know, Trump probably doesn't like that because it's definitely stole the news cycle for several days here. This thing isn't going away quick, you know.
Well, he likes it, actually. I hear that you say he doesn't like it, but he likes it because it gives him a way to sharpen the knife or the sword that he's been sharpening for years, which is us versus them. And so it's like, you know, now this proves that Joe Biden is going to change the housing in your area, and that's going to prove that our identity as an America or an American has changed. And I'm with you because your America looks like this thing. It's a wonderful communication look at bias and what people believe, what the identity of what an American is, and then if you're a Republican, you're listening to Trump. If you're a certain kind of Republican, you're listening to Trump and going like, I want the America that used to be sold to me as a white suburban landscape where I can have my own house because that's what my parents lived in and that's what's familiar to me, and I don't have that fully and I can't afford that fully, but Trump will bring that back. I want that back. That's what America belongs to be, is the way I grew up as a child. So it's an unsettling communication narrative. The people that are in the realistic America will say, wait a minute, but we're not that. We're much more mixed. We're much more integrated. We're much more inclusive. We spend a lot of years being inclusive and welcoming to other countries, and, you know, bring us our tired and poured and huddled masses, bring us that. And America gives you the opportunity to move. But that's not, as the 1950s American kind of fades into history, as if it even existed other than about this interesting 15 to 20 year window tops, and this other America has come up from that, his message still appeals to that America that he grew up with, and many of us as kids grew up with. I grew up that as kind of like the last of the baby boomers. I mean, I'm kind of like in that spot. And so the image is different, Tom, and Kamala Harris as a educated, skilled American, born here, that her parents came here with the aspiration. Just think about that. They came with the aspiration of, our kids are going to work hard and do something. Camilla said it in her speech. Right. My mom said, Do something.
Clearly, she's done it.
Now, what gets me inspired and moved is that that's the actual sentence my dad used to say to me. Don't stand there, do something. In other words, he'd be starting to work. It's like, figure out how to help me. Don't just not do something or watch me do something. You get in the game. You figure out how to help or support me to do something. So when she said that, I was going like, oh my gosh, she's got my vote because that's familiar to me.
Yes.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I agree.
How are you inspired or moved by either Joe Biden's narrative or intention about America or Kamala Harris's intention? What inspires you?
I actually was inspired. I was inspired by both of their statements,
yes,
speeches, if you will. That this is the first image of them together on the campaign trail. Obviously, it was a closed event because of COVID, but I thought they both spoke very well, and their vision for America is the kind of restoration that I've been wanting to see. But my bias and my political leanings are such that I've been looking for this sort of relief, this escape from the turmoil that we've all been suffering in for the last 3.5+ years now. And I was thinking, wow, that was very well spoken, very well said. And then I go into my Facebook feed, and of course I'm friends with all sorts of people, not just those who think like I do.
That's right.
And I was so shocked to see
surprising.
how much hate, how much criticism, and really, Bill, these two questions that you've posed to us, from a Republican perspective, what is an American? And from a Democrat perspective, what kind of American or what kind of America do we want to live in going forward? I mean, my gosh, I couldn't believe the perspectives, the amount of of real hate, bias, and even racism that was coming out in a lot of these statements toward Kamala Harris. People saying, well, she's not really black, she's not really African American. I mean, there's a lot of partial truths there, but one thing is for sure, like you described, she's firstborn in America from parents that came here trying to get more for their kids, and she's achieved a heck of a lot and risen now to become the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic side. And that's an incredible achievement, but it's really scaring a lot of people at the same time that it is inspiring and exciting to a lot of other people. And boy, I mean, that's really, there's a lot of discussions going on about, the identity,
pain.
I guess.
There's a lot of pain, the identity, because the identity, as soon as a politic communication that has a division in it, and a division narrative instead of an inclusive narrative, which Trump has driven, and certain news media has made a lot of money on, certain networks have made a lot of money on, is division. It's us versus them. As soon as that shows up, then all of a sudden there's not an acceptance of one side towards the other. So you and I can have a wonderful conservative discussion, which would sound like, here's what protection and safety looks like for me, and here's what protection and safety looks like to you. Here's what fiscal responsibility looks like to me, and here's what fiscal responsibility looks like to you. Here's what progress looks like to me, and here's what progress looks like to you. So that is, are we going to go by the numbers, or are we going to figure out how much value this person is actually bringing? So for example, if an engineer gets paid, $100,000 or $200,000, depending where they are in their career a year, is that person bringing value to the economy versus a social worker that you pay $50,000 to $100,000 a year to our nation? Which one is bringing more value? The person that makes $100,000 to $200,000, or the social worker that's making $50,000 to $100,000? Which one's bringing more value to the economy?
Well, probably the one who's getting paid more because they put more back into it, or not? I mean, I'm just guessing here.
Well, that's an interesting thing. If this social worker lifts 50 people out of poverty, the answer is the social worker has more value than the engineer. But that is a perspective discussion that we don't have time for in our current narrative. It's, I see the amount, but I'm not looking at the impact.
Right. Well, it's not easy to understand with a simple question, I guess, because what is the total impact? I mean,
yeah, that one's a toughie. So what winds up happening, if you look at your Facebook feed, you're going to look at a person that may do a derogatory towards the liberal left, maybe calling them a robotic sheep or something. And they're having they're looking to have a rational discussion, but really it's a perspective discussion that maybe the liberal left is striving for versus a rational discussion. A rational discussion has some limits to it, just like the engineer has some limits to their ability to contribute to the economy. I'm going to call it out by calling a measly $200,000 a year putting back into the economy. That $200,000 is kind of measly compared to, I just lifted 50 people out of poverty, over the last year. Oh, that revenue is, getting people from, 15,000 a year or below to 30,000 a year, and times that by 50.
Sure. The economic impact is significant. I agree.
The economic. Okay. All right. So when we take a look at having a healthy discussion about communication, now all of a sudden I'm listening to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, and now I'm just going to look for a rational way that I don't agree with them. And then I'm going to look for, what can I chisel away? Here's the first chisel I would take. Weren't the two of them just were fighting on a stage together? And now they're in agreement? Well, that looks like hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's the first one they go after, isn't it? Because it's easy. It's easy to pick up.
Aren't they hypocrites? Because they were fighting and now they're not. Now, if you think about one of the things that Republicans do well is loyalty. We are not going to hide our fighting and our disagreements. In fact, we're not going to show that we do anything wrong. I want to be the party that doesn't show mistakes. I don't want to be the party that just pretends that they never made a mistake. I want to be with that party because my identity is I'm feeling pretty good about my party.
How is that any different than the differences of opinion between Trump and Little Marco and Lion Ted in the 2016 election? They didn't all agree either. They were arguing on different sides. And now each of those guys, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, line up with Donald Trump most of the time and support him. And even though they had differences, just like you're saying Biden and Kamala Harris had during the earlier campaign. I mean, these are facts.
But they're loyal. That's you're actually making the point. They're loyal because they're voting with him. See, the thing is that Americans also don't like conflict in-house. We'll do conflict by creating a war in a foreign country where we're killing somebody that is not of our color, or a projected belief thing. But we don't want to, especially in our party, look like that we're in odds with each other. We don't want the messiness.
Well, but that's
that.
my point. They were at odds before Trump was the nominee and became president, and the same way that Kamala Harris and Biden were at odds earlier this year during the campaign, and now they're aligned. How is that any different? I'm a little confused on that one, but
well, you're going to be confused because when the loyalty war has been won, the disagreement that one has with another person cannot be amplified. In other words, the bully won, and the follower is now following the person that is, I'm going to let my morals and ethics drop off. Police have have a similar challenge. Is I'm not going to argue against my partner because my partner has to support me later. If this person's a bad cop, I'm not going to do that. And I think Vice TV did a wonderful job of interviewing the silent police people, going like, you don't know what it's like in there. Because they all have to depend upon each other loyalty-wise, and therefore they can't point out those people, and there's no mechanism for that reporting to be safe.
So they give each other loyalty at the expense of justice internally.
Justice, integrity, service, protection. They're protecting their own. They're not protecting the public because they have to protect their own, because there's an expense to themselves and their family if I protect others. And there's nobody to hold anybody accountable in that system, because this system is protecting itself.
Okay.
So the thing that's exasperating is that if I empathize with the Trump viewer of Kamala Harris, it's, well, I'm guessing you're feeling mad and angry and scared because you don't like the version of America that she's talking about, and you don't really like women who are being direct, and you don't like it when women speak up, and you would like women to stay in their place.
Now,
home.
Oh, I'd love to see how they would
answer. Is that what you're requesting?
They would have to agree. They would have to disagree with you because they don't want that
they don't want to be
reason.
Seen as that.
Right. And so then they have to try to come up with other legitimate things that they don't like. And they're going to walk themselves further out the plank trying to figure out what that is, right? Because at the heart of it, I think it's less that than it is, the reality of what type of American she is, not the substance of her character and her education and experience and all that, or her decisions,
they'll click to the next weakest argument. Well, when she was a prosecutor, she put black people in jail too.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like that you want to make sure that there is integrity in who she's prosecuting, is that correct? Yes. And so you would like her to not talk about Black Lives Matter and also the rule of law. And you want those things to be separate because to you, those look like hypocrisy. Yes, if Black Lives Matter she's then going to make these people free. No, she's going to hold them accountable for the crime that they did. And there's actually footage of her doing that, going like, listen, we're holding you accountable because my parents brought me up to hold people accountable. So the only problem is like our biases are going crazy in America right now. All of those things we used to be able to push aside, going like, yeah, I can live with that bias. I'm good with that. It's like, no, you can't. No, you can't. You can't live with the bias of saying we need to have a society that's more congruent with our values of respect for every person. And therefore, we cannot call the Washington Redskins anymore. We can't do that. We've got to change it. And they stepped into it, and people are pissed because the loyalty towards the Redskin is, yeah. So it's exasperating. My own belief structure is actually, my personal belief structure is going like, yep, that's got to go. It's got to go on the rubble pile of racism, because it's got to go on the same rubble pile as Confederate generals. They got to go too. Now, part of me used to think of being a person that was born in Florida, just saying.
Yeah.
Isn't it charming that there is the Republican flag, that's very funny, the rebel flag being flown in certain places? But there's nothing like driving up the Florida Turnpike and going into a restroom and saying, wait a minute, there's a men's restroom over here and there's a men's restroom over here? What's the difference? And the answer was, oh yeah, that's when those were the colored restrooms, and then these are the white restrooms. And I've got to reconcile that in my head, going like, oh, they used to in Florida, and they're still in those places, two kinds of restrooms. And one of them is what used to be for coloreds, and one of them used to be for whites, and we don't do that anymore, but the visual representation is still there.
Well, Bill, so how do you think that Republicans saw Biden and Kamala Harris's little debut yesterday? How do you think that people that are not in alignment with their ways of thinking?
How can I create messages of disrespect is how they saw it. I already didn't respect the Democrats. Now I got to figure out a way to disrespect Kamala Harris. And that was evident on Fox News and Tucker Carlson. I am going to disrespect her by minimizing her. I'm going to call her whatever. And if you look at Facebook, the whatever's turning out is, here's hoping we see a huge wave of nasty women at the polls. A huge wave of nasty women voting for Kamala Harris. It's right. A tweet in a direct, it's a meme or a message in going like, yeah, okay, you want to call her that? You want to try to disrespect her? Well, then you're disrespecting all women. So that's a mobilization narrative.
Right.
Going like, you want to try to disrespect us? Oh, yeah? You have no idea, what cat you have by the tail right now, because we're coming around to scratch you. And there's certain women going like, yeah, women are to be seen and not heard, just like children. I mean, there's a group of folks that are in that space going like, Yeah, this is how I get to treat women, and women better not stand up, or you're going to be called one of those nasty women. Instead of, hey, look at that vocal mother over there. Look at that,
Look at that mom who's
college.
standing up for her children, or standing up for, something like that. Instead of, no, I know the meme I saw that was sort of a counter to that had all these women of integrity that Trump has called nasty women on it.
Right.
And they're in 3 boxes. And the 4th box was, who's the one that was Jeffrey Epstein's, who's been arrested, with Giselle, or is that her name?
Giselle,
Maxwell or something, whatever, Janine, whatever her name is, Maxwell, and said, and then Trump's quote for her was, "I wish her very well, frankly." So it's only women that he doesn't like who are nasty women, and then women he likes, no matter how, flawed they are. Well, is there any message maybe, but to sort of close the loop on this sort of debut of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden as the Democratic ticket, that anything you think they could have said a little better in their debut?
I really appreciate your question, because there's 3 things that they could have said better. They could have leaned their elbow on what fairness looks like, what equality looks like, what equanimity might play out to be between men and women. Where she could have worked on, this is what the quality of my character looks like, and it's not going to be easy to hear the quality of my character. I mean, I would have loved her to say that. You know what?
Boy.
It's not going to be easy to hear the quality of my character through the pushback that we're all going to get.
That would it'd be almost like Martin Luther King Jr. speaking from the grave, really.
That's correct.
And she is that generation that was, born during those years when he was having all those speeches and freedom marches. And then, he wishes his children would be judged by the content of her character. She could, without plagiarizing him, could take that message.
This is what a quality character looks like.
Wow.
The quality of character looks like me arguing with, not agreeing with Joe Biden, arguing with him, giving my point of view about what the best direction is, and being an inspired advocate for women. Not a person, she could have completely differentiated, not be a quiet bystander sitting in a chair and being silent and letting just the president speak to engage the public and not having a voice in the background. Gosh, I think that would be a better vice president, don't you? And then she immediately differentiates with Pence. I mean, I used to get really pissed at, here's Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and Trump and Pence in the room, and Pence was sitting there like a statue, and Trump was having a vibrant argument with the two of them. I just wanted Schumer or Pelosi said, Mike, what do you think about this? How can we better work together? And just hang him out on the fence right there, because he couldn't open his mouth then. And if he did, Trump would leer at him and everybody would see it. It's like loyalty means shutting up and just following this person. It does not mean what's best for America or what collaboration working out would look like, because that's what a democracy is. Regrettably, they didn't have the skill of engagement about how to do inclusive dialogue. And they're just each one of them is looking to score points and messaging that they needed, which with very few of them did, because they're trying to argue facts. You can't argue facts with a marketer. You can't argue facts with a brander. You can't say why Tide is better than, Cascade. You can't do that argument in a political setting. It's like, no, Tide is better. No, Cascade is better because, the dishes look like this. Tide pads are way better than that. It's like, you don't want to be in that marketing dialogue. So my recommendation is to step back, realize that a part of American politics is now marketing and branding, and pick messages that are going to stick.
Yes.
So,
all right.
So it'll give our listeners something to think about right now, moving on. And I just appreciate this dialogue, and it's really, really helpful to see how this is going to play out communication wise.
I think we're going to be talking a lot about communication messages that stick or don't, and we're going to talk more about how the facts don't matter. Because I think that
the facts don't matter.
I think that somebody like Kamala Harris might generally lean more toward the facts, seeing as she's a former federal prosecutor, and facts
she's going to
are her sort of how do you say where you'd probably run back to more often.
That's correct. And we'll talk about scaling perspective next time too. Okay.
Cool. Sounds good, Bill.
All right.
I appreciate
More to
it.
come.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Tom. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.